Hi everyone, Giovanna here. Today I chose to compare Nozomi's article with the Melissa Bradford article called Friends in the Orchid Room, An Inquiry into Value Creative Dialogue. There are some similarities between both of these literature reviews, and I also don't have very much familiarity with literature reviews, so I started by kind of trying to find the similarities between the two. And in the week 2 video in the explanation of the structure of the literature review, in the section about the introduction, Nozomi mentioned the path and kind of the framework being presented at the end of the introduction. And that's something that you see in both articles. This is Nozomi's article, the end of the second introduction, kind of. And she lays out how she's going to talk about the teacher-student relationship in Soka education. And Melissa Bradford does a similar thing. Melissa's literature review is more author-based and less method-based, like Nozomi's. So she talks about which authors she's going to highlight throughout her literature review in terms of how they practiced and talked about dialogue. The two articles, you can really clearly see the different sections with the headers, of course, in both of these. And what was interesting, first of all, Melissa Bradford's article is quite a bit longer, and I think there's a little more room to be able to have more headers. And I think it's very interesting that she starts at kind of a funnel with the larger talk about dialogue in education, and then she really gets more and more specific as she moves through the funnel. So hopefully this isn't making people dizzy by seeing how quickly I'm going through this. But she also kind of checks in with the framework, which I thought was really interesting and helpful. And she talks about Ikeda, and then she moves through in terms of Ikeda's philosophy for dialogue, how he practiced dialogue, and of course he's the main person that she's looking at, so he's at the top of this funnel. And then she starts incorporating the other authors as well. And she clearly states who's next. So she goes through each of those authors, and then in her conclusion explains the differences and similarities and uses them to bolster her explanation of this value-creating dialogue in education. And in Nozomi's article, it's similar in terms of the different methods. And each one is laid out in its own and analyzed. And then the conclusion, in the conclusion, it's explained how they are intertwined with each other and how they support each other. So I thought both of the structures were really, really clear, and it helped inspire how I'd like to structure my own. And that's in addition to the actual content of both pieces, which in both cases, is really, really interesting. But since we're asked to focus basically on the structure here, those are the things that I wanted to point out. I think the main difference between the two is just the length. Melissa Bradford's is an entire chapter, and Nozomi's is just a few pages. So that's, I think, the main difference here, besides that one is structured by author and one is structured by methodology. That's about it. That's all I have, and I look forward to seeing everyone else's screencasts. Have a good night. Bye.